Hey, Mark.
Yeah, what's up, buddy?
I'm really excited because you know how Joe Sestak is from your hometown?
Yeah, buddy.
Well, today we get to interview someone from my hometown.
Delaware.
They did not like Obamacare in a box with a fox, in a house, or with a mouse.
Pokemon go to the polls.
Have decided in 2020 to run for president.
And Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys.
To get back in the business of creating a more peaceful world. Please clap.
Hi, welcome back. I'm Andrew Furman,
And I'm Mark Ramson.
and we're here today with Delaware Senate candidate Jessica Scarane. How are you doing today, Jessica?
I'm great. How are you both?
Doing well.
Doing well. So,
Awesome.
to start off our conversation, what inspired you to get into politics, and why are you running and primarying Chris Coons?
Yeah, so partially that came through the work that I do with nonprofits here in Delaware. So when I moved here a decade ago, I got very involved in volunteering and started by tutoring and mentoring students at the West End Neighborhood House in Wilmington. I did that for a few years because it was important to me to work with students in that kind of third and fourth grade level, because it's really important that they grasp reading skills at that point in their life so that they can be set up for academic success. After volunteering there, I got involved with an organization called Girls Inc. of Delaware and decided to join the board there. And that started giving me sort of different perspective on how politics and our daily lives really intersected. And one of the reasons that that came about is because a few years ago, the state of Delaware had a budget gap that it was trying to fill. And it tried to fill it by cutting funding to programming that served Delaware's most vulnerable residents. So things like nonprofits, things like public education, and social services that people rely on. So that kind of started to help me recognize that we have a system of power that's kind of broken in our government, and it's doing work to protect people who are already in positions of wealth and power rather than protecting the most vulnerable, and it's subjecting the most vulnerable to abuse. And I believe that Delaware should have a senator who is working to fight against that and take power back from the powerful and corporations and make sure that it gets returned to people. And while I saw that happening at the state level, I recognize that a lot of the problems that we are seeing in our budgets and our school funding and social services funding is caused by the lack of funding that's happening at a federal level.
All right. So many Delaware political figures, such as Senator Carper, Senator Coons, and Governor Carney, subscribe to the idea of political figures needing to work their way through the ranks. Do you see this as a problem in Delaware politics?
Well, I clearly disagree. I do see it as a problem. I think that what that does is it systemically keeps people out of politics, keeps people disengaged, and makes them feel really disillusioned. You know, I've heard people since I've started this campaign come up to me and say, I'm so excited you're running and that you're a new face, because it's been the same 10 people running everything in this state the entire time that I've been alive. So people are tired of kind of always hearing the same names, tired of being told that they have to wait. And they recognize that the things that we are facing are, like climate change, for example, are crisis level issues that we can't just sit back. The people who care about these issues can't just sit back and wait for someone to decide to step down or to move to another position. We are getting to a point where if we don't make decisions and take action ourselves, that we are going to be past a point of return.
So you mentioned there a little bit about the power dynamic in Washington. And
Yeah.
On your website, you talk a lot about money in politics. What do you think is the most effective and clear path to getting money out of politics?
I think it's simple. I think we have to publicly fund elections. There's no reason that the wealthy, powerful people in our country should be able to essentially buy seats or buy influence. It keeps people of working class or poor backgrounds out of politics because it is so daunting to see the amount of money that you have to raise, the amount of money that is kind of inconceivable to a lot of people to propel yourself into a seat. Something I actually learned when I started running for this seat is that in Delaware, you have to pay to get on the ballot. It's not done through signatures or petitioning. So it costs more than $10,000 just to have my name on the ballot. So that is the type of money that, for a lot of the people that I'm going to be asking to vote for me, is, what would that do in their lives? It would be difference making in their lives, but that's what it costs just to get your name on a ballot so people can vote for you. So when you see things like that, it's really off-putting and intimidating to people. So it causes people to disengage from the start, and that's not even getting into the amount of influence that money in politics and donation that corporations and powerful people make, and how that influences the decisions that we are seeing politicians make. I mean, an example of that is that Senator Coons and Senator Tillis have both received more than $100,000 from pharmaceutical companies, and they are both working on a bill that would allow pharmaceutical companies to patent knowledge so that they could essentially block other people from working on research for drugs that could potentially, cure cancer if they discover that these two genes affect a woman's getting breast cancer. They can actually patent that knowledge so that other companies are unable to actually work on drugs that use that knowledge. So that's a direct connection that I see, where you are receiving money and it's influencing the decisions that you're making.
Yeah, you see that a lot too with pharmaceutical industry. Like, same with importing drugs from Canada is another issue like that.
Yeah, and I question, how is that helping Delawareans? Because when I look at that, I see a drug that might be life-saving isn't going to get made, or it's going to be made and so expensive because there's such a monopoly on it because of the information being patented. Or I see that by not allowing people to be imported, drug prices are going to stay unbearably high, and it's going to cause people to die. It's going to cause people to stay sick when they don't need to be sick.
So you also mentioned a little bit about healthcare just now, and on your website as well, your support for Medicare for all. And the debate amongst Democrats right now, you see that on the Democratic debate stage in the primary for the president, is the debate over public option versus single payer versus expanding on Obamacare. Why is single payer the best option when it comes to universal coverage?
Yeah, I think single payer is the best option because as long as you have private insurance companies and private insurance plans in the marketplace, someone is paying to create a profit margin for a company. And I think that is not the right way to be spending dollars that can go towards healthcare. In our current system, everyone is paying into a private company who is then deciding how they bake in profits, how they bake in bonuses, and how they bake in salaries, and how they essentially ration our care so that they can maintain the profit motive in our healthcare system. And that's why I believe that single payer is really the best way forward, because it's going to cut all of that profit out and instead ensure that we are delivering the best care and that the money goes towards care, not toward bonuses and things that take it out of the actual healthcare system.
Medicare for all is estimated to cost $32 trillion over the next 10 years. How can the American taxpayer afford that sticker price?
So that's $3.2 trillion a year. Do you know what we spend on healthcare right now? We spend $3.5 trillion a year. So that's actually savings, and that's, again, taking profits out of the system where they don't belong. It's ensuring that everyone gets comprehensive coverage, which they don't have now. It would include medical, dental, vision, mental health services, all of these things that people just go without. And I would argue that clearly we already have the money because we are already paying for these things. And we're paying in ways that actually don't get quantified in dollars, like when someone goes without care and they get sicker and sicker, and when they finally do go, they're too far down the path of, say, cancer, and they're going to die. Rather than them going earlier because they had coverage, now we've lost that life. And that, to me, is actually a cost that's much higher than the dollars that we're talking about.
That's a very good point, and something we definitely can't quantify in a dollar amount. So coming from, I'm a child of an educator, so I have a few questions.
Me too.
That's great.
Me as well.
Yeah. I have a few questions on your education policy, as well as your opinion on Delaware's education system right now. So, given the severity of social and emotional needs schools are facing today, how do you propose we address these issues?
Yeah, I think that schools need to be funded in a way that allow them to deliver full wraparound services that students need to grow up healthy and as a whole child. So that to me means that we need to be funding meals in schools. We need to be funding counselors and nurses that ensure they are in every single school. I know that in the district where my mom works, which is outside of Delaware, it's in New York, but still, it happens all over the country, that there are not either nurses or counselors in the school every day. They're unable to be paid to be able to be there. So if a student happens to get sick on a Wednesday, well, maybe a nurse won't be there to actually serve them. So to me, that is actually something, like I mentioned before, that needs to start at a federal level where we change our priorities and we recognize that funding education should be a priority in our country. And that needs to come from the top down so that states aren't held essentially at the door of poverty when they are trying to fund their schools. By the federal government not providing that money, the local schools have to turn to things like property taxes, and what that creates is a lot of disparity from one district to the other, which we need to eradicate to actually get to equitable schooling.
So, our nation struggles with supporting special education programs as well. How do you plan on supporting these programs at a federal level?
I think that comes down to, again, funding models. I think that if there needs to be a consideration for a student who has special needs and ensure that there are dollars that go with that student so that they get services that are necessary for them. And I think that we also need to do a better job of funding special education teachers and ensuring that their pay it reflects the work that they're doing and that it actually attracts more people into that profession. I think that goes for all teachers. That again, I believe it starts from the top down. I think that if our country was putting education as one of its priorities, we would be putting the dollars behind it. And we wouldn't rely on individual districts and individual municipalities to try to figure out how to pay for these things. It's much harder to do that at a smaller local level than it is to do that at a higher level federal government level. And it, again, leads to things like the zip code where you live, resulting in what the outcomes in your life look like.
That's a very good point. So you live in the Wilmington area, correct?
I do. I live in the city of Wilmington.
Great. So that's part of Newcastle County, for those who don't know. And Delaware has an excessive amount of private, public, and charter high schools in Newcastle County. Do you view this as a problem?
I do, in the sense that I think charters have tried to fill a hole that existed in our public school systems that was created by these funding cuts that I'm talking about. And my problem that I see with charter schools is not, I would never question a parent's decision to put their child in a charter school. I understand why they're making that choice, right? They are looking at their options and they're trying to make the best choice for that child. What I want is for them to not have to make that choice because the public schools are well-funded, well-supported. I think what I struggle with charter schools is that it is taking public dollars out of the system and then making them unaccountable to taxpayers. So you are taking money from taxpayers and they have no way of voicing their concern about how those dollars are being used. And again, they are going to a private company who is making those decisions without an elected school board that we can kind of use our voice to influence and then and drive the direction of the school.
Thank you.
Yeah. So transitioning back to more of your overall campaign in general, you're an advocate of Medicare for all, housing for all, the Green New Deal, and other more progressive ideas. And you don't take any court PAC money either. This sounds like a lot like the Justice Democrat. Are you at all in contact with the Justice Democrat Foundation and free to join their movement and identify as a Justice Democrat?
You know, I think the work that they are doing to support candidates has been amazing. And obviously they were involved in 2018 with supporting Carrie Evelyn Harris, which was fantastic for her run for Senate last year. I hope that they will be open to having conversation, but right now I'm just kind of supporting the work that they're doing.
That's great. Circling back to Carrie Evelyn Harris, she primaried Tom Carper in 2018 and garnered close to 29,000 primary votes, which is a pretty sizable number. How do you plan on building on the progressive foundation laid by Harris to defeat Senator Coons?
Yeah, so we are going to be a campaign that is going to put in a lot of miles on the ground. We are going to try to knock more doors than have ever been knocked in this state, because we believe that if we talk to voters and we get in front of them and we hear what issues they're facing and what policy is important to them and discuss how the policies that I want to put forward will make a material difference in their lives, that they will be interested in supporting this campaign. They will become advocates for the campaign and spread that message through their friends and family as well. So this is going to be a really ground game focused campaign to ensure that I build up that name recognition with people, and people get to recognize that they can trust me to fight for them by seeing me face to face on the streets and knocking on their doors.
All right, well, thank you so much. That was Jessica Scarane. Thank you so much for joining the show. We will be back next week. In the meantime, I'm Andrew Furman.
And I'm Mark Ramson.
And see you next week.